The Cure Chronicles is delighted to welcome James Tyson. James is a New York-based stand-up comedian, actor, HIV, LGBTQ advocate, and social media influencer who has over 60,000 followers on TikTok. He was raised in a family of truck drivers and ranchers in California and studied theater at NYU. Praised by Out Magazine and Broadway World, James has spoken openly about being queer, HIV positive, and sober for more than 7 years. James uses humor to combat HIV stigma and fight discrimination, which has earned him praise from the New York Times for opening the door for non-binary representation in the stand-up arena.
James, thanks for being on the show with us today.
Thank you for having me.
Pleasure, of course. Hey, right off the bat, I mean, you have had a very successful career as a comedian. You've been highlighted in magazines, even an article in New York Times. This is really fascinating to me. I know there's a lot of stuff we're going to talk about, but, what initially inspired you to go into stand-up comedy?
Trauma. I mean, that's always the way in for most comedians. I don't know that I'm very successful, just putting that out there, but it has been like a good couple of years in terms of building stand-up. It's definitely, I use humor to cope with difficult things, and I have since I was 5 years old. My whole family is like that. And it became, as an actor, the only path to that I could just do it all the time as a creative. Like, often you're on other people's terms, even as a writer. You gotta find other people to read it or find, and sell it. But stand up, I could just go out any day and I could end this conversation right now and go and find an open mic or find a show, because they're happening all the time everywhere in New York. So
Yeah, that's interesting that you say that. I think a lot of art comes from trauma, or let's say emotion. And yeah, I think that, I've talked to a lot of people where they say that their art is sort of their outlet for, sort of the feelings that they have inside. And so that's, very interesting that you say that came from that. And by the way, very successful in art to me is anybody that can afford to eat. Right. I used to think struggling artist is one word. Right.
Right.
So if you can do your art, and I noticed that.
Well, in that sense, I'm a successful waiter.
Well, that's good. I mean, the whole point is like fulfillment, right? In life,
Yeah.
doing something that has some meaning. But no, I got to say that I looked at a lot of your stuff on YouTube and the internet. I just kind of assumed that maybe this was totally your full-time gig. But regardless of that, I think it's super cool that, you are using your humor to educate the public on HIV. And I think that's so important to the idea of reducing stigma out there. I think stigma is a big issue. How do you use comedy? I mean, like, how does that fit into, the idea of going out there and being funny? And getting people's attention and sort of connecting with them on that level. How do you utilize your art for reducing that stigma?
For me, there's a formula, I think, and it's sort of no looks passes between like what I do or what like a comedian does and what on your end you, like the researchers and scientists, do in terms of where the treatments are and so forth for HIV. So in order for me to use my sense of humor to fight stigma or whatever it is, it really helps that the medication keeps me healthy, and it's not a big deal for my life as long as I have access to the medication. That is huge. If this was 1981, my jokes would be completely different. It wouldn't, my approach, it would be impossible to take the approach that I take now 30 years ago, or I guess almost 35 or 40 years ago now. So that's a huge part of it for me. I mean, I was really, for myself, when I tested positive for HIV, I guess 5 or 6 years ago now, I was stigma. I was disinformed. I did not know about the state of the treatment, and I was really upset for 3 months. I was just like in shock, and my at a certain point, my doctors were like, okay, they didn't say this flat out, but there was sort of this attitude of like, honey, you're fine. It's gonna be fine.
Yeah.
Um, and once I had that personal experience and then test results and data I could point to and be like, oh yeah, no, I'm fine. And then when I realized, oh, everyone else nobody knows this. Like, so it's this thing that really shocks people and really puts people in a state of fear, which I personally experienced. And then you have all it's like in comedy, it's like you talk about anything hard when it's emotional and you don't have data to point to that it's okay. You have to figure out a way to like make the audience okay with that. For me, it's like, no, I have test results that say there's undetectable, there's all these studies and there's all these, so I can really shock an audience with something, and then I as the performer know how okay it is, and I can pretty easily bring them back to how okay it is.
Yeah. So you've taken the journey yourself, and now you're sort of expressing it in your art form. And of course, the overall message is that the feeling that you had when you were first diagnosed and the feeling that the uneducated have about HIV has a ton in common. So that journey is really relevant. And
Yeah.
yeah, that's really something. Yeah, that makes total sense to me. And it's so you got diagnosed and you said you had a few really hard months. And I hear that also. Sometimes I hear a couple of really hard years. Like I hear people like who are suicidal that they have so many misunderstandings about what it means to be diagnosed with HIV and what the implications are to your future. And we live in the United States, so we're kind of lucky right there, right? Because anybody should be able to get the meds, right?
Well, yeah.
I know it isn't actually as good as it should be, but there are the healthcare exchanges most places, right? So you should be able to get health insurance, and health insurance pays for the pills and for the doctor's appointments and things like that. It's easier some places. I heard in New York, they give you a bus pass so you can make sure you can make your doctor's appointments, stuff like that, some areas are more responsive to it and other areas are not less responsive. But, provided you can get somebody into one of those safe spaces, okay. And maybe you can attest to this, from your perspective, living in, a place where I think that, folks are really open and empathetic towards, this health issue, that you can get on the medication and you can kind of resume a normal life at that point. Is that true?
Well, yes. I mean, in terms of the last question, absolutely. If you have access to health insurance, whether it's through the state or whatever it is, and you can get the medicine consistently for decades, then you will be fine. I mean, that's my experience. I know that there's a very rare, like, some people don't respond to some medications, or some medications stop working. They have to switch, and the treatments maybe become more pills, but if it's caught early, yeah, all of that is true. I will say, I think in most states, it's actually not that easy to just get the medication. I might be wrong. Maybe you have more data than me. I know I'm very clouded by my experiences in Texas and my secondhand experiences in Texas, where it is very bad. And that my mom has a friend who's literally, now part of this is her son has like an addiction problem as well. Like there's co-occurring or, things going on. But I mean, he has AIDS and is like on his deathbed. And I think had to be, I actually don't know where that story ended. But I know it didn't end with him getting medication through the state because that program doesn't exist. You can't let whatever the illness is, you can't just let people die of it especially when the medication doesn't actually cost them anything to make. It doesn't actually, there's no reason for it to be $3,000 for a bottle of 30 pills. It doesn't cost them that much to make it. That's how they're pricing it. So no, Texas is not doing anything correct. There's no reason for people to be dying of AIDS at this point. The medication, it's honestly, I'd make this joke in my stand-up, but like diabetes seems worse to me. Honestly, it seems insulin is way more of like there's this, you got to time it, you got to watch your diet, and if you screw it up, then you're out for the day. And that's not I don't think about it. I take one pill a day, and that's how easy it should be. So sorry, no, I don't
No,
think
that's a
taking
great,
insulin,
no,
right.
I mean, that's a great observation, because I haven't heard that observation made before, but you're right. Measuring your insulin and balancing out your sugar and insulin, in your bloodstream is way more complex. And also the consequences of just missing it, right? It doesn't just throw you off for the day.
Right.
You could lose a leg. You could go blind if you don't manage it properly, right?
And there's no states where if you get diabetes, the state is like, oh, we'll cover all of your insulin. That
Right.
doesn't exist.
Oh, well, that's
Whereas in New York, this program in New York saved my life, turned
Yeah.
my life around, gave me access to the health insurance like you're talking about. And so anyway, yeah, diabetes seems
And
like
New York got
way bigger drag.
Yeah, and in exchange, New York got a comedian and apparently a very successful waiter.
A very successful waiter.
So, yeah, but this is the thing: is these are human beings and they're productive, right? There's more reason to have empathy for a human being than just the fact that look, let's be charitable. No, it's like that's how society works. People that are healthy are productive. And, this is actually not that difficult to manage. And you're right. Yeah, there's a lot of profit in that $3,000. I don't know that, I don't have an opinion on that. But I think that in the United States, one of the richest countries in the world, there should be a way to pay for it for the people that need it and to derive the benefits of having those people re-enter society and also not be contagious. Think about this. It's like you don't have to worry about passing the disease to somebody else. You're undetectable.
I mean, from a policy perspective and from a capitalist perspective, it makes no sense to let people die from this. It's contagious. You need able-bodied people to generate income, and it costs the system next to nothing to make sure that it's all of any with it. Honestly, the stigma is always, it's never about rational fact. It's never about rational reality. The decision to not take care of HIV patients in these states is steeped in homophobia. It's steeped in other forms of stigma. It is not a sound policy decision for any community. It doesn't make any sense.
But that's interesting. Like, yeah, you said that steeped in homophobia, but it's like HIV is not a gay disease. It's an everybody disease.
It
right?
is to these people. That's right. What it's like. You talk about stigma. It really, it's hard for me to get too hung up on the actual details of like, yes, the medication solves it. I could talk all day about it, but at the end of the day, it doesn't matter to them. Stigma isn't rooted really in, oh, what is my life going to be like tomorrow? It's rooted in the feeling you get thinking about what would your mother think of you knowing that you have HIV. And
that's self-stigma, right? I mean, that's not even, that may not, I guess, your mother better than I do. So,
that's
maybe
not about my mother.
I know it's not about your mother, but everybody knows their mother. But the point is like, you might be actually making an accurate observation about like, yeah, my mother may be shocked by this and maybe I can't tell her about it. But I'm just thinking about, the stigma, that not just the self-stigma, but that stigma that's all around us, associated with even the idea of that not everybody falls into, cisgender, heterosexual category. And that's not a problem, for most people. It doesn't create problems in the world.
I mean, anytime I get any kind of attention on social or whatever for anything trans related, anything HIV related, they're there. They're in the comments.
Really?
They're yes.
Yeah.
I mean, they're not,
and they can anonymously snipe, right? From
or just as themselves. They're not ashamed. Nobody's ashamed of their homophobia or their thoughts about HIV or their thoughts about trans people. They're not. They're actually quite proud of it. first and last name on a lot of these accounts. I mean, that's, I think, one thing about, like, you talk about fighting stigma, and you mentioned earlier, oh, there are people who, even in years stay in this place of feeling about it, or stigma, or depression, or whatever it is, and not wanting to talk about it. And it is that there's an irrational, deep-seated homophobia around the issue of HIV, and a deep-seated, even beyond homophobia, hatred of otherness. I mean, if you look back to the 80s and when it was spreading, even as it spread to other communities, those people were lumped in with, those faggots, those whatever, it became a brand of being associated with other, and with sickness, and with whatever. And that's why it's like, you can talk all day now about how healthy people can be, but that's not actually what people's issue is. There's an irrational sense of, like, you have a societal sickness.
You're somehow associated with a potential breakdown of all of society and humanity. Wow.
Or whatever
that's
is.
that level, the level of fear of other,
Oh, yes.
Yeah, like the United States wasn't already proof enough that that's not true, right? I mean, think about our entire, origin story of, people coming from everywhere, and, every other has gone through this. And then now they're the mainstream, and they're looking at others, this whole idea with immigration, right? In a country of immigrants, that we have a problem with immigrants, is kind of ironic. Yeah. Huh. So, okay. So you get out there, and you're, and sadly, because I feel like I'm taking this interview, to a dark place. So it's not as funny as I was hoping it would be. So let's lighten it up here a little bit. So let's talk about your stand up, and so you're in front of an audience, and you're actually using your life as, sort of source material for your stand up, I'm assuming. How's the audience react to that?
It's funny you ask, because that is definitely, they're shocked every time. I've never done this bit and not had a room full of people go dead silent, waiting for, like, what's next? Like, the second I say that I tested positive for HIV. I do think if that ever stops happening, I'll stop doing the bit. If in terms of like my motivations, I do love that I think I do educate and destigmatize the issue as I talk about it, but my primary motivation is traumatizing the audience and then getting the laughs off of that. But every time they go dead silent, which I think is a testament to just, I mean, truly what even, and I'm in New York, where, a lot of these people, I'm in gay bars, a lot of these people have HIV or are educated about the issue, but it's still
wow. Yeah. I guess, people may even be afraid to respond to that, because they're looking around and like, well, if I respond to that, are people going to think I have HIV? Right. I mean,
right.
It's right. That's the whole thing. And it reminds me of an old joke about the guy who manages to get the mule to laugh, and nobody can figure out how he does it. And it turns out that he hits him with a 2x4 first, because he said you can't get him to laugh until you get their attention. Right.
That's exactly right. Yes.
Yeah, and so then you're delivering that like shock line, and you're right. Like, oh, by the way, I was diagnosed with HIV is like a room clearing, statement.
Every
right? Can you
time.
imagine? You're like your waiter tells you that, right? I'm guessing that when you're serving food, you're not like, oh, by the way, I'm HIV positive, because like you don't have time to get them to recover from that, even though it makes no difference to them at all, right? This is the whole point. Is like, it's not like you're holding back something that actually has any impact on their lives. So, but, you could go, oh, by the way, I'm gay. And they'd be like, yeah, it's cool. Like, all right, can I get a glass of water? Right.
Right.
And
exactly.
But if that's totally different now. But I believe the gay thing at one time, even in New York, was probably like a little bit of a showstopper, right?
Yeah. Well, especially around the AIDS crisis.
Yeah. But then again, that was because of the the mix up, right? The association of two things that aren't really associated
Right.
cause that, right?
But
Yeah.
even before that, you're right. I mean, it was actually illegal to be gay in New York, I think, until like the late 70s. Like, not just sodomy, but like publicly being with another man. Also, breaking the rules of gender was illegal in New York until much later than it should have been. Like, you could not basically walk down the street trans without the police arresting you for solicitation.
Wow.
So yeah, I mean, these things are very recent still.
Huh. Yeah, I guess I had such an idyllic childhood. I wasn't aware of it. I grew up in a incredibly liberal enclave outside of Boston, and with highly educated parents, and just no real sense of that discord.
Well, but it was so, in your defense, I will say, because I do think that like I'm a little bit younger than you, and I think older liberals get a lot of flack for exactly what you're talking about, of just like not being aware. And I mean, I was born in '87. I was like coming of age, 10 in the '90s. '90s, a perfect example of what you're talking about. Everyone thinks it's so liberal. What a horrifically homophobic decade that was. Growing up closeted in the '90s was terrible. But so many liberals at the time thought, oh, it's such a liberal, whatever. In your defense, like, the internet wasn't there. It was way easy for the monsters of this world to be very, very sneaky about the laws they were passing, the people they were arresting, without someone filming them and putting them on the internet. Well, that's why we all know now what they do. But I wouldn't have known then what we know now because of the internet.
Yeah, I mean, think about the fact that George Floyd's death would have gone unprosecuted, right?
And
except for everybody had cell phones
for 80 years. But you didn't
Yeah.
know then. And it's the same. I didn't know until 3 years ago, and I was on a comedy show about the history of Stonewall that I was like, oh my God, it was illegal until when? What? Like, you don't know what you don't know until you know it.
It's true, and back in the days when it was all television and, whatever, and the internet wasn't really carrying the messaging, that resonated. But I think humor is, gripping when it comes to that. Like, think about what a Saturday Night Live cold open does in terms of like shining a light on the irony of what we're just all experiencing together. And we all need a good laugh too about it, right?
It helps you embrace hard truths, I think, like you're saying.
Yeah, it really does. So do you see that, going on with the people that you meet and the work that you do out there? Are you seeing, how's it making a difference? Are we chipping away at this?
I hope so. It's kind of like Batman does need his villains. So part of me is like, well, I hope they don't learn too soon, because then I got to write some new material. No, I do. Again, I will probably stop doing it when it stops shocking people, and when, anytime I'm in a gay bar, I have a show in a gay bar. I mean, which there are a lot in New York of like gay bars with their, little comedy show. Every time I do that material in a gay bar, someone comes up to me after and says, I just tested positive, or in fact, someone said, I've been positive for years and I still can't talk about it openly. Like, I've never seen anyone talk about it the way you talk about it. That it's so niche, and I have to figure out something more mainstream in order to make money at this career. But I do that is so special, and it does keep happening. I've been doing this material for 4 years now, I think. And that's never stopped happening.
Your openness about all this stuff, right? Is it can build momentum, right? If enough people are that way. It was like back in the days when Harvey Milk was saying, one of the ways to reduce the stigma around, a gay and lesbian is to just for everybody to come out of the closet and everybody out there to realize, like, these are all your friends, you're all the people right? And they aren't monsters. And that's the same thing, is that I felt like maybe there's some common element there about HIV, because the reality of it is not scary. It doesn't affect somebody else. Your status does not affect anybody else, right? And yet they take it like it does. And that's just, naivety or ignorance, if you want to be a little bit more negative about it. But, that the education that you do through comedy, maybe providing those sound bites and those moments of relief for people to, to help foment that whole revolution.
Yeah. And I do think we're all, like, I was just thinking about like you're saying, like, naivete or ignorance. And I do think on, like, my most judgmental days, I'm like, well, they're ignorant and they're dumb and I hate them. But I do actually understand at least being scared about society falling apart and trying to identify the reasons for that. Because I think we all feel that, especially in the past 6 to 10 years, that there's this, like, underlying fear that, like, is this the end? Or, like, is our government falling apart? Like, I think the images of the insurrection, like, those sorts of things, like, where are we in the, like, maturity of our, like, republic and our society? I think we're all feeling that fear. I think you then compound that with, like, ignorance around a disease, and it's easy for these people to be like, well, you're the reason we're falling apart.
Yeah, interesting. Like,
But
you're
we all
right.
have that. I feel.
Yeah. Yeah. What my theory on that has always been that, we used to be in the middle of the food chain. We now eat everything in sight, and we're so powerful as a species that, even Mother Earth needs to fear us, right?
Yes, also
like,
a good point. Yeah.
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 But
Environmentally, where are we at? Where are we? Is this the end?
I know, and our
We're getting
genetics.
too big.
Our genetics remember those old days, because our genetics haven't changed from 30,000 years ago. So we're still looking over our shoulder at things that'll eat us. I heard that kids' greatest fears are of being eaten. Where do they get that idea from? It must be wired in our DNA. So we must have a level of fear that is, sort of natural, right? And it also has become, a political cudgel, right? Or a way of accruing political power now to go ahead and stoke those fears. So that's exacerbating it further. But I also think there's another side to this thing, that one of the things I've seen in life is that we generally make our fears come true, because we focus on them and we actually draw the conditions closer to us that validate our fears. That there's also this natural thing where, that there is some positive aspect to being right, at least being correct about your fears. And so you create them, right? Think about all the hate that is being, projected out there in the world over these irrational fears of these others, right? What is that doing, right? Demonizing makes demons, right? So we're actually, creating conditions where we're validating our fears and going down even further into this spiral, into the black hole or whatever. So it's interesting. Yeah. It's like, to me, the difference is education, right? And education needs to be palatable. And there's nothing more palatable than art, some form of art, whether it's comedy, movies, whatever, is something that can present information for this, but also can, sort of, generate a little bit of energy in the heart. And those two things together make the experience memorable, right? When I think about my earliest memories, they were accompanied by huge emotion, right? It's like the emotion was the cement that locked in the memory and the thought and the whatever. And art does that, right? So I got to laud you for, standing up there and being open about this. And also, to bringing, your art form to it to make it a little bit more memorable and a little bit more accessible, right? That's an important thing. So you're feeling it. It's you're having people come up to you afterwards, and boy, I'm just trying to imagine that moment when the whole club goes silent, right? And
I actually just did so funny. I did a fundraiser for an HIV organization. I wish I could remember their name, but every performer was HIV positive. Like there could not have been a more educated group. Or like we'd even done like, I think at some point, I think I did my HIV set after the nonprofit did their spiel about HIV, and still there was this level of like, still.
We got a long way to go, it sounds like.
Yes,
right?
yes.
But at the same time, yeah, you're seeing little bits of light, through all this, all your interactions with these folks.
Yeah.
Okay, so what's the thing that you're involved in right now that you're the most passionate about? I mean, you've got your comedy and your waiting, but are there any projects that you're involved with right now that you're excited about?
At the moment, no. I mean, I'm working on a script. I'm working on some like personal projects, and I just did my hour. Where I performed my hour at Stand Up New York, and I'm possibly gonna be putting that on like Patreon or something, but I don't have anything official to plug. If I want to plug anything, just follow me on Instagram. It means way more than it should in this business. So please, James Tyson, Tison. I'm pretty passionate about my stand-up, and if you're in New York, anybody out there, I am gigging, and I put, you can always sort of see on my Instagram where I'm performing, and I'm often doing this set still. So it's definitely still a current thing for me.
Well, I really encourage all of our viewers who are going to be in New York to see your show. And one of the reasons I didn't ask you how you get people from that shock moment, because I think that's going to be a thing of beauty. That cannot be an easy journey from that moment of silence.
It's fine for me.
Back
the
to
audience seems
laughter.
upset.
Yeah, but that's good. No, that's what's so cool about it, right? Okay, go see this guy. He is going to hit you with the 2x4, and now you are listening. And it sounds like you're going to have a good laugh and also learn a lot at the same time. It's been wonderful talking with you.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, no, really, thanks for spending this time, and congratulations on, not being, a totally struggling artist, that you're getting recognition. You're actually performing in
more than it was.
gay bars. You might actually have something up on Patreon at some point, and writing, and and enjoying life, I hope. Good luck on all that stuff, and I hope next time I'm in New York I'll be able to catch your show. I really want to see.
Please do. Yeah, let me know. I'll hit you up or get you tickets or something. Thank you for having me.
That's kind of you. Yeah, all right, well, thank you. Take care.
Have a good day.